Disclaimer, I just want to say this is a mod game and this is not to be taken seriously, so YouTube staff, thank you for understanding that this is just for entertaining purposes, please don't ban me.
Previously on Kaiserreich, but at that point it was too late as the communist troops continued their advance into Berlin, and soon the great German capital was lost. With nothing left, the German government officially surrendered. Now we were alone as the entire faction was debunked. Tanks had no trouble cutting through the front lines, and before we knew it, we were at Berlin. But just because this great symbolic city was liberated, that does not mean that the syndicalist beast has been tamed, but even more surprisingly, and I would say excellent news, came in as the communist capital was lost, not to our Eastern coalition, but to the Canadians who made a comeback after all. Things were finally starting to look to our favor. The last city finally fell to our troops, and soon the long-awaited announcement was made public. The Commune of France had finally surrendered under the pressure of our combined troops. Now the only place with syndicalist influence was the British Isles, so it was time we crossed the English Channel to help out the Canadian troops to put an end to the Red Menace itself. The British troops, exhausted by the war, possessed little resistance, and soon this dread war was finally over. Now it was time to pick up the pieces, rebuild anew, as we claimed the mantle of our German brethren that we liberated from the French and Socialist boot. We can finally proclaim a new Germany, a better Germany. From the ashes of the old Kaiserreich, a new Germany stands resurgent in an unknown world, ready to reclaim its place in the world stage. Europe had been completely transformed for the third time in less than half a century. All maps were thrown out as a new world order was established. The old Prussian German Empire was no more. It was up to us, the Baltic Germans, to restore our rightful glory as Europe awaits. Our superior armed forces proved to be the determining factor, not only in the defeat of the Russians, but also in the destruction of the syndicalists. As such, we must begin implementing our superior model so that the new Reichsheer can begin operations as soon as possible. Now that Germany has been rescued from the Red Boot, we must also liberate the rest of Europe from other possible threats and enemies lying outside of our borders, waiting for their moment to strike. We cannot allow that. We shall make the first move instead. As a transformation and rejuvenation of the Baltic states have proven to be successful, we shall do the same to our Germanic brethren that have been liberated just recently, and soon all of Europe shall also be transformed yet again, but this time under our deals. But the ever-opportunistic Russians, being free from oversight since the collapse of the Kaiser's government, have proven to not be trusted as they have used Europe's moment of weakness yet again to expand the Rome state. This only proves that Russia must be completely and utterly dismantled, exterminated, and tamed for the security of all Europeans. We cannot just sit idly, and we must take immediate action by securing all of our neighbors. Of course, we still have not completely recovered from the last two major wars, so we must target smaller states until we are ready to take on the Russians and eventually the Austrians as well. The new German economy shall not be plagued by mammonic capitalism. The soul theft is at an end. The nation shall control the economy to make sure these dangerous elements do not creep in again. Our people require more space, as we must return to a simpler way of life compared to living in compact and cramped cities. With the Russians causing up trouble in the east again, we just have the perfect target and excuse. While the west is secure, the northern front is still exposed. As such, we will make sure that the Scandinavians are under our terms. While the new German army has been established, the rapid deployment of new troops against the Russian threat has left them unexperienced and undertrained. We shall revive our old doctrines back when we just controlled a small duchy, making sure our new armed forces are just as good as our old one. If the Second Weltkrieg has taught us anything, is that new technological advancements can change the tide of the war. As such, our scientists shall be focused on the new and latest technologies, so that we are always one step ahead of our enemies. Finally, with all preparations ready, we can begin large-scale operations against our greatest threats. The first enemy to be destroyed shall be the Austrians, as even though they helped us against the Reds, they still cannot be trusted. In this case, the Austrians have more troops combined with their puppets, so if we want to win this war, it is imperative that we strike with lightning speed, catching the troops off guard as well as their puppets, rushing down towards Vienna to force a quick surrender. Our strategy paid off, and the Austrians were overwhelmed with our superior tanks running through their empire. Since their other puppets were not called into the war in time, only Austria and Bohemia surrendered. This was good, as picking off the rest would be easier now that they are fighting alone. Next ones to go were the meddlesome Polish that decided to help out the Austrians. They too will face our might for their insolence. Also the Swiss, since they are just Germans denying their brothers. With both Poland and Switzerland now gone, we now have a strong enough foothold in Central Europe to challenge the bear for the second and final time. For that, we will need that every able German purse their heart into this righteous crusade, so that even if they don't participate in the front lines, they will help in the war effort. Our preparations were almost ready as our new tank and infantry formations were finished, ready to take on the Wehr. Our new Reich will be the greatest this earth has seen. Our spirit shall guide this nation to glory and will last 1,000 years. Finally, it was time to end this constant struggle between our peoples and determine who shall lead this new world. Our war with the Russians proved to be even tougher this time. They had enough time to rebuild since they contributed nothing in the struggle against the Communards. This made it so that if we wanted to win this war, we need to bleed them dry, just as we did 7 years ago in the battlefield. With the help of our modern tanks, the Russian troops were no match, and slowly we bled the Russians as the infantry closed pocket after pocket. By this point, the Russians had sustained 3 million casualties and the lines were beginning to thin out. Normally 3 million would be nothing for Russia, but considering the staggering number of casualties they took in the Second Weltkrieg and now this, there was no way Russia could sustain this number of casualties in their population. Our all-out offensive began as we pushed towards Moscow for the second time in our lifetime. It almost feels like deja vu. Anyway, the Russian casualties just continued to pile up. We were getting closer and closer to their heartland. By this point, our scientists had discovered a new powerful weapon capable of destroying entire cities with one blast. But this was experimental. We still needed a target to test it. And what a better place than the damn city that has caused us all of this headache. Soon the remains of the Kremlin were in our hands. The Russians, completely demoralized, were not even a threat anymore. But that's when I remembered that the old buff that you get as the Baltic duchy against Russia, that I forgot to use originally, was still a thing, so I decided to pop it out just for good measure. Now it was only a matter of time, as the only thing was to wait until our troops finished off the rotting corpse known as Russia. Eventually, after pushing all the way towards the Urals, with them not controlling the rest of Siberia, they had no choice but to surrender. The Russian bear was tamed once again. We revived the old puppets of Ukraine and White Ruthenia to keep the Russians in check, and also gave Finland Karelia for some beautiful map borders. Now, the only thing was to cement our power in the Balkans and crown ourselves the masters of this new Europe. And with that, all of Europe that was not under the Entente was under our boot. We united our great Germanic people under one flag, destroyed the treacherous Austrians that had sided with their subjects instead of their own people, tamed the Russians for good, and exported the national revival to places like Poland, Hungary, Scandinavia, and even Italy. Now, the world was in a standstill with our Entente competitors in the West, while we mastered the East. Who knows what could happen next? But that's for another time. And that was it for the entire trilogy of the Baltic Duchy. I hope you enjoyed this long journey that took a while to edit, editing the whole thing. Also, if you didn't notice, I used my editing software to change the horrendous flag you get as this new Germany for the one you actually get in Kaiserreich, that quite frankly looks way cooler. With this challenge done, there is another one even harder than this one in Kaiserreich, but you shall see that one in due time. If you would like to see more content similar to this one, remember to subscribe as this really helps out the channel. This was the Defectus Expert, you are dismissed, soldier.